Right, hello everybody, good afternoon, this is Durwin Banks. I've come to London here to talk to Robert Eddison. Robert's recently published his book, which is absolutely brilliant because I'm still trying to get mine published. Well, I'm writing it. Anyway, Robert's
good luck with that.
Robert's book is in a very exciting niche. Not many people do what Robert does, and Robert, your book is all about aphorisms, and it's called Wisdom and Wordplay. So I think the first question is, what are aphorisms?
Well, I'm often asked this. My own idea of an aphorism is a pithy one-liner that is either witty or profound, or both.
Well, that's good, because that's what I always tell people when I'm telling them about you, what you're doing.
I'm very glad.
So that's good. But you've written so many of them, Robert, haven't you? I think when we first met, you said you've written 30,000 aphorisms.
Oh, it's 33 now.
33,000? So when did you get started?
How did I start? Well, what an interesting question. I wrote, my first stage play was Commanding Voices, which had a longer than average 5-week run up in Hampstead, here in London,
Right.
in North London. And when on rereading it, I discovered 4 standalone lines, which amounted to an aphorism. And I thought, well, why do I have to write a full stage play in order to produce 4 one-liners? Why can't I just do them neat as standalone aphorisms? And that was the beginning of it. That was 20 years ago.
Are there any famous people that have written aphorisms?
Oh, Lord, yes.
Tell me one.
Well, the ancients, I mean, Plato, all the household names, Plato, Confucius, Euripides, I'm sure they all, well, certainly some of them were known for their one-liners. And then in later times, of course, we had Noah Card, Oscar Wilde, my absolute mentor.
Yeah, so he's the famous one, isn't he, that everybody knows about?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and they will have known about some of the ancient ones too.
Oh,
I
I'm
guess.
sure they would.
They wouldn't have known what they were really necessarily, but that's what they are. They're these little one-liners.
Yes,
They're aphorisms.
I'll give you an example. Nothing is more relative than another's absolute truth. Or a more sort of visual one, if you like. The absent-minded professor is not so much absent as present elsewhere. Just one-liners.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it?
And I've done them under 150 different subjects, ranging from cannibalism to political correctness.
So some people write a diary every day, but it sounds like you write an aphorism a day.
Well, that's absolutely true. In fact, it's interesting you say that, Durwin, because I did start with a conventional diary, and when I reread them 10 years later, you know, that I went to a supermarket and decided on switching from butter to margarine, I couldn't have found them more boring. I mean, who the hell cares? You know. But then I thought, well, why don't I start my aphorism diaries, my thought diaries? So yes, you could, as you rightly said, you could argue that my aphorisms, all 33,000 of them, are the content of 20 years of thought diaries.
That's amazing.
And I'm currently, up to June 2014, I was averaging 4 a day. I'm now averaging 7 a day.
So you're increasing your productivity.
I am, and I think the quality, in fact I know the quality is better, because I can date the early ones as needing a bit of work, whereas the later ones don't.
So does an aphorism a day keep the doctor away?
Well, I'm a great believer in doing what you like. What do you love? There was a survey out last week saying that only 13% of the British population enjoy what they're doing. And I think somebody like yourself interested in mental health would probably agree that to spend 8 hours a day doing what you don't enjoy is probably not too good for your health.
No, I threw you a bit of a curved ball there, I'm afraid.
You did? Well,
but you got out of it really well.
I hope I caught it.
Yes. So how long did it take you to write 30,000 aphorisms?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah. And as I say, I can date the early ones by their lack of quality, if you like. And like anything else, I mean, you're a farmer, you run a linseed oil farm, you hone your craft. I mean, I guarantee you're a better farmer now than you were at 25.
Well, I've certainly learnt a little bit about oil and fat.
I bet you have, yeah.
So that's quite interesting. So do you have to work on them? Do you just you write them down and is that complete, or do you have to come back and maybe tweak them a little bit?
That's another very interesting question. Some come neat. I mean, you know the phrase "seeing is believing." Well, I suddenly thought, why don't I put "peeing is relieving"? And I
get to really basic stuff, Robert.
Yeah,
I can see you.
I know. It's my shortest 3 words. My shortest stuff.
You will tackle anything.
I will, and I do, and I can. I've got to the point now where I could write you give me an idea, I'll come back with a one-liner within 10 minutes. And I could not have done that 20 years ago. You gradually hone your craft, and my later ones are, as I said, better quality than the early ones.
Right.
For that reason.
So you've been writing them all this time.
I have.
At what point do you think in that 20 years were you ready to publish your book? And then why didn't you?
Well, I suppose maybe, I don't know, 10 years, half or midpoint, I could have published a book. It wouldn't have been of quite the same quality as Wisdom and Wordplay,
right?
Which we launched in October last year. In fact, you were at the launch, come to think of it.
I was indeed. I had you interviewed by Stanley Johnson.
I was. We had a wonderful time.
Yes.
And next week, I think he went to Australia, to the jungle.
Yeah, he didn't ask any questions that you wanted him to ask.
Well, he did in the end.
But I think you got them all in the end.
We did in the end.
It's all a bit of fun, isn't it?
Well, it was great fun. I mean, I felt sorry for him. I mean, he had gone to Oxford, and I duly commiserated.
Yes, you're a Cambridge man, I believe.
I'm a Cambridge man. So yeah, I mean, that's 20 years. It's only a third of my adult life, I suppose. So it's not all my life, but the later part of it. And to answer your question, I think I could have published a respectable book 10 years ago, but I didn't.
No, but maybe you were just waiting for them to mature a little bit.
No, not at all. No, I thought they were wonderful at the time.
Right, let me put that another way. As time went by, they matured, and there came a point when, yes, it's now ready. You had a long pregnancy, and all of a sudden the birth happened.
It's a nice theory. No, the actual reason I delayed was because I never intended to publish in the first place.
Oh, well, that's a good reason.
These
were your own personal.
They were my own private thought diaries.
Right.
And as with almost all private diaries, you expect on your death to see them popped into a bin bag and shoved into the nearest skip along with your underpants.
Right, now, Robert, that really is odd, because here you are making your own private diaries. You published a book which is on the bestseller, and now you've got thousands of people following you on social media, and
yes, true.
And all of those kind of interactions. So that's exactly the opposite. You've turned from a private person into somebody communicating with the world.
No, I didn't turn. I was turned. I was turned by the relentless, unremitting insistence of friends to publish. And I resisted that pressure for years.
Right.
Because I thought it's a little bit, you feel a bit vulnerable publishing your private thoughts in public. But then I was eventually persuaded to, my then agent, in fact, said, Robert, you've got to raise your profile. And the way to do it is why don't you try a few aphorisms on Twitter, see how you go. And I did that. And to my amazement, as you rightly say, I amassed, they gained immediate traction. And I've now got, I think it's over 33,000 followers. Roughly one follower per aphorism, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
Nice coincidence. And then, not content with that, another friend of mine said, now Instagram, this is the time to jump on that bus. This was back in March last year. And I've now got 22,000 followers on Instagram. And I think it was last month, I got over 300 likes for a single aphorism. I'm posting 2 a day, much fewer than I do on Twitter. But the response, of course, is in a different league to the response I get on Twitter.
This is amazing that you can do that, and you have done that.
Well, I share your amazement.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
But actually, Robert, what we're actually talking about is almost a masterclass for any budding author. You know, you're writing your book,
yeah,
and here's what you've got to do: get it out to the world. And you've Twittered it and Facebooked it.
Well,
you've got all these followers.
I was in the social media long before the book came out.
So you were a journalist.
I still wasn't planning to publish a book, incidentally, but I was so. I shared my friends' delight. They weren't amazed. I was amazed. They were not, which was rather nice of them. It was very nice of them not to be amazed. And then, of course, the next logical stage, and it took only a little bit of pressure after that point, because I had proved concept, as you implied, via the social media. I thought, well, maybe they're right after all. Maybe they will sell if I dip my toe in the water and publish a slim volume, which Wisdom and Wordplay is.
I've got it here in my hand.
It's only 300 aphorisms.
He's got a foreword by Charles Brandreth. So you're obviously fairly well connected.
No.
Am I going to get a yes to any of my questions? Yeah, Robert.
Well, no. I mean, the Socratic debate is following. We're following the lines of a good Socratic debate. And he was my mentor for 3 years. He was one of the people, gently nudging me. He's far too diplomatic to do other than gently nudge, to publish. And of course, because I have huge respect for Giles Brandreth, as have many of us.
Yes, I've heard him speak many times. I wouldn't have put him down as the head of the diplomatic service by any means.
Nor would I put Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary, but there you go. Using phrases which I won't repeat on air.
No.
But anyway, Giles was kind enough to write that long three-page foreword to the book.
Tremendous.
And I really owe him a big thank you for seeing me through to publication, basically.
So I'm holding the book in my hand now, Wisdom and Wordplay. It says 300 in there.
Yes.
You've got 35,000? 33,000. That's 33... No. How many books is that? If we could divide 300 into 30,000...
Well, probably give me 90. If every aphorism were publishable, which they're not, as I've already indicated, the early ones particularly are not particularly publishable. You get 3,000, that's 90 books. But Professor Adrian Poole at my old Cambridge College, he was chair of English literature at Cambridge University for the whole university. So he was number one English guru at Cambridge, and he coincidentally comes from my own college. And he emailed me to say that he reckoned a third were of the same quality as those in book one.
He came to the book launch, I think.
No, he didn't.
He didn't?
No, he didn't. I invited him, but he wasn't. He clashed.
Yeah.
And so if you bin 22,000, which is 2/3 of 33,
right,
you're left with 11,000 aphorisms, which would make certainly over 30 books of the same length and quality as Wisdom and Wordplay. So they're all written. So a publisher doesn't have to be nervous, or necessarily pay me in advance to write, because they're done. They're there, ready to... It's like a sort of overloaded cherry tree, and
ready for plucking.
Ready for plucking. And all I have to do for book two is shake the tree, a branch, have a basket underneath, and collect 300. It's going to be 360 cherries for book two. All brand new, mint fresh aphorisms, to follow roughly the same format as book one.
I love that. There's quite a few authors have written lots of books. Detective murder stories and all that. They've gone out and shaken the tree. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Maybe there's another aphorism in there somewhere, Robert.
I'll
let you think about that. You needn't answer that.
There may well be. To answer one of your earlier questions, how do I conceive an aphorism? I half answered your question, but not fully. what I said was some of them come ready-made,
Yeah.
but others don't. They come as a core idea. I mean, like the cherry tree. I mean, there's no aphorism there. It's a core idea,
Yeah.
which I then write down as an idea. And when I'm next on a bus or tube, I work on it and try, make an aphorism of it.
So your brain is always thinking aphorisms.
It is, and you get amazingly sensitised to language. I mean, I'm always very rudely putting my sister up when she gets something wrong. And then on the radio, you see, you pick up on some of these extraordinary expressions, running like the clappers,
Yes.
hot under the collar. I mean, there are thousands of expressions, which I used all my life without even realising I was using them.
I know.
But now, thanks to doing these aphorisms, I'm very sensitised to language,
Yes.
and I'm aware. I pick up on everything.
I know. I'm as we said, I'm a farmer, and I actually produce linseed.
Yes.
And linseed is a fat, and often on the radio they talk about good fats and bad fats, and they haven't got it right. And I've now thrown bricks at goodness knows how many radios and televisions. So you're a brick thrower at the radio when you hear these things, do you think? It makes you so cross when they say something that's completely wrong or in the wrong context or the wrong meaning for a word.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, I mean, sometimes there are infelicities and grammatical errors, and, the media is seen as a singular word rather than a plural word. The media is. Well, that's just not grammatical.
No.
It's the media are.
So are we...
You don't say the horses is. You say the horses are.
Yeah.
And people with no classical background don't know that the word media is in fact a plural word. So those kind of things, you're right, make me very irritable.
So are we dinosaurs? Are we moving with the language? We need to keep the language reasonably understandable, don't we? Or otherwise you don't understand what somebody else is talking
Well,
about.
no, I mean, it's extraordinary, because when I mix with, as I often do, with people in their 20s, there are certain phrases and idioms that they've never heard of. I mean, I even have an old manual typewriter, and I showed it to a guy, he's about mid-20s. He had never seen it. He said, "What's that?" I said, this is something we used to type on before internet, before you were born.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. So you have to make allowances for the younger generation. I wouldn't say, therefore, I'm a dinosaur. I'm just a different generation.
Yeah.
And it's got its pros and cons.
Well, we've kind of covered a bit about the book, but I'd like to maybe fill in the gaps a little bit more. So, obviously, you started writing quite early in your life, and you tell me you were a journalist.
I still am. Yeah.
You're still a journalist, and you've written for...
This is only a hobby.
Yes.
Like a diary is no more than a hobby. I haven't made a penny from it as yet.
But you will.
You
can't publish 30 books without making some money.
No, I should be making something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm talking to the poor, impoverished writer in his garret.
Yes.
In a couple of years' time,
That's right.
we'll be talking in
Yes.
assumptions, surroundings.
Well, I've done quite well in journalism. I mean, happily it's no longer a garret. It used to be, you're quite right. But, you're right. I mean, I earn from my journalism, not from my aphorisms.
So what newspapers have you written for? Have you been a sort of an employed newspaper, or were you on a newspaper, or were you writing and sending the articles in and hoping they were going to be published?
The latter, really, because I've tried to avoid...
Is that called a stringer?
No.
No.
I've tried to avoid the temptation of joining staff on a national paper, because those are my friends who did. One is an ex-MP. He lost his fresh eye after 2 years. He lost his fresh eye, and you're at risk of becoming a prostitute, because the editor demands you follow the paper, the line of the paper you're with, and if that goes against your own principles or beliefs, you've still got to do it, and write leaders which go diametrically against what you believe in, and you do become a sort of journalistic prostitute. And I wanted to avoid that as well. And mercifully, I've kept my fresh eye, and that fresh eye has given me all these aphorisms. Yeah. So, with hindsight, I'm very glad I didn't join a national the staff of the National, because I think I'd have paid a very heavy price had I done so.
Yeah, you'd have been working against your core belief.
Well, not necessarily, but there was the risk.
Some of it. Yeah,
there was the risk of that
risk
happening.
Of it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm less. I'm not poor, but I'm less well off than I would have been had I joined the staff of, say, the Times or the Observer or the Mail or something. On the other hand, I've kept my independence and my fresh eye, and that's priceless.
Yes.
As we're proving now with the aphorisms.
Absolutely. But of course, one's perception of what a journalist is spends a great deal of time drinking away in a pub, so you might have actually drunk away all your profits. But I don't think you drink a lot anyway.
I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm just a social drinker.
Just a social drinker.
I mean, when I was 3 years on local papers up in North London, where I sort of cut my teeth as an apprentice journalist, and there I learnt so much. In fact, the editor under whose aegis I came, Eric Gordon, he was the only one on the staff of that local paper group who had been trained and worked in Fleet Street. So I had a Rolls-Royce apprenticeship, Rolls-Royce mentor.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I was dead lucky, and that enabled me to fly.
And part of your flying was you had an interview with Margaret Thatcher. How did that come about?
Well, Hugh Rossi, who then had the neighbouring constituency to Finchley North, which was then Mrs. Thatcher's constituency, I got to know through a mutual acquaintance, and I leant on him to introduce me to Mrs. Thatcher, and who eventually granted me an interview, and that was quite an event, I can tell you.
And we can hear that, can't we? Is it?
Well, it was recorded, but only because I broke my arm the previous day falling off a bus. And that was in plaster. I'm left-handed, so it was in plaster, so I couldn't write.
Right.
So I rang her PA and said, "Look, can we please record it, because I can't write tomorrow when we meet." And Mrs. Thatcher came to the phone and long pause. And she said, "Well, I don't normally record my interviews, Robert, but in the circumstances." So that was how I came to record it. And
that's tremendous, and that's all. To some extent, this is about how you approach people and how you ask for things, isn't it?
Well, very much so. And how I approached her was a problem, because people say, "Oh, well, muddle through. You've got half an hour." That was the most they would give me for the interview. Muddle through and do your best. I said, "I don't work like that. I plan it." And I read Patrick Cosgrave's biography of her the previous night, and the thing that stuck in my mind was that she hated being interrupted. Hated it, just couldn't tolerate it. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to get nowhere with this if she's going to interrupt me all the time. So I prepared my entry lines. Thank God I did. I go in and we exchange pleasantries, nice to meet you and so. And then I said, "Mrs. Thatcher, have you got a gun?" "Gun, dear boy? Why would I want a gun to shoot me with? But I've only just met you. Why would I want to shoot you?" Because, Mrs. Thatcher, I want to cover the domestic front, international, diplomatic, your earlier life, how you came into politics, your future, your vision for the country on a 5 and a 10-year view. And I've only been given half an hour to do it. Long pause. And I said, "If you're going to interrupt me, I won't get through." Longer pause. "Interrupt me as much as you like, dear boy." And from then on, she was putting my hands, but only because I planned it and rehearsed those first vital lines.
Yeah.
And in the end, after half an hour, her PAs were over there. She was here by the window there in North Finchley office, and they were saying, tapping their watch.
Yeah.
"Now go away, Thomas. Now I'm quite happy with Mr. Eddison. Just leave us alone." And I had an hour and a quarter with her.
Isn't that tremendous?
And that interview, I then rang the Times. Well, at first it appeared as a double-page spread in the Hornsey Journal, which was part of the North London news group that I told you about,
Yeah.
in Crouch End up in North London, where I was still an apprentice journalist. And being a bit cheeky, I rang the Times and said, "I've done this interview with Mrs. Thatcher. What about it?" Well, they said, no, we don't take. We have our heavyweights who do, like Kenneth Harris, who lived across the road here, was one of them, and he does the prime ministerial interviews. But thank you very much, Mr. Eddison. I then said, okay, fair enough. Can I just send it in, please? Would you allow me that? Well, of course you send it in. And I did, and I had a phone call saying we'll take it. I said, what's the max? This was the idea, and they saw the Hornsey Journal version. I said, I'm going to rewrite it for the Times. And I said, what's the max? They said 1,400 words. And in the end, it came to 1,700, and it was highly condensed. And it appeared on the 10th of May 1978, the year before she became Prime Minister. Now that Times interview, I shared a whole page in the Times with my absolute mentor of the time, Bernard Levin, who was the most brilliant journalist and recognised as such. Between us, we shared one whole page of the Times. So for me, that was just a dream come true. Now, I was still a cub reporter and apprentice for local papers. I get that. And that opened all doors to me for my journalism and enabled me to remain freelance for the rest of my life. To answer your earlier question.
Isn't that?
I never needed to take staff jobs.
What a lovely story. We've got them, haven't we? I actually share a little bit of that with you.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because I was at an exhibition with my products.
Yeah.
When I started, this was like 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And for some reason or other, somebody from Radio 4 had been in there, and they rang me up to say, would I like to be on the Today programme?
Yeah.
And I said, well, yes, of course.
Yeah.
And then they rang me up on the Thursday morning to say, oh, we can't have you. And this is when I realised that sometimes you have an effect on world events.
Yes.
And the reason they gave was Saddam Hussein had let the weapons inspectors in. But what I thought in my mind was Saddam Hussein heard there was going to be another oil man on radio, so how could he fill that up? Just let the inspectors in. So I didn't get my day on Radio 4. But maybe sometime in the future.
Absolutely.
But
once you've got your book out, Durwin, I thoroughly encourage you to do that. Sooner the better.
But the
it
Times
does
link,
give you a certain status, I must say.
Yeah.
So
but the Times link was at the end of that week. I take the Times, and sometimes I get to the end and read the small letters, you know. And I'd got to the end this day, and I looked to my left, and Alan Corran has written his whole column about me in the Times.
Wow!
So I don't know how he did it or where he got all the information from, but that's how it happened. So we've both been in the Times.
Fascinating. I'd love to see it.
But only a tiny little bit. Well, you know what Alan Corran's columns were. It was a fair bit.
Very good.
So that was quite interesting.
Oh, lovely, yes.
Anyway, enough about me.
It's nice to share that.
So you were writing for newspapers. You met Maggie Thatcher.
Yes.
And you also went to Europe, toured around Europe and learnt French and German.
Well, when I was,
Where did that come in the chronology?
How
old were you then?
I was 18. I hitchhiked across Europe to Innsbruck.
So we've missed out quite a bit, haven't we? But anyway, carry on.
Well, yes. I mean, journalism is something I came to fairly early, but not on day one.
No.
Because it was my then fiancée, whom I'm still in touch with. In fact, do you see those artificial flowers there in the vase?
Right.
On the étagère?
Yeah.
She arranged those for my last birthday present.
Wonderful.
So we're still in touch. And Anita, bless her, saw an ad in the Times, oddly enough, with a vacancy for the assistant editor of an educational monthly journal called School and College. And I applied for it and got chatting with the editor. And after about 40 minutes, we had a Thatcher replay, because one of her secretaries was sort of saying, Mr. Thatcher, 7 more people to be interviewed, queuing up, waiting for you to interview them. And then my editor, marvellous man, well, he's marvellous because he took me, called Rex Dyer, said, no, send them away, I'm offering Robert the job. So there I was, and 8 months in, I had rather cheekily applied for a lectureship teaching what are called Slavic studies, Russian, at Toronto University in Canada.
Did you know Russian?
Oh yes, I was, by then having done national service, I was a qualified Home Office Russian interpreter.
Right.
In fact, I was bilingual from scratch in 15 months. We worked like slaves, and were paid to do so as national servicemen. And that's another story. There we were, because I dreaded national service, having
told what to do. Yeah.
Being just whatever it was, it would be boring.
Regimentated.
Regimented, absolutely. So I heard of this Russian course, and being a linguist, I got all my 4 A levels were in foreign languages. I applied to do the Russian course, and there we were, sequestered down in Bodmin, near Bodmin, I think, in Cornwall, square bashing for 2 months. But I then heard that 20 people from the Royal Air Force would be selected to do a very, very intensive course, 14 hours a day, to become a Home Office interpreter, because the government at that time, at the height of the Cold War, Stalin's still just about around, were very worried that we hadn't got enough spies. And you can't be a credible spy unless you speak the language pretty fluently. So anyway, I applied for the job. For the place on the Russian course, was duly accepted, knowing no Russian at all, but on my linguistic credentials. And it was fiercely competitive, because all of us wanted to get to Cambridge, where you lived virtually as an undergraduate, no uniform, you were in just a normal suit, civic clothes. So I spent 2 months shivering by a gas. This was a mere, let me think, 51. This was 53. This was 8 years after the end of the First World War. I think still rationing.
Second War, yeah.
Second World War.
Rationing finished in 53, I think.
Oh, around there, yeah. So we were recovering from a collective nervous breakdown, and never mind economic collapse. And there I was, shivering by this anthracite stove in virtually a Nissen hut down in Bodmin, with my Semyonova grammar, which I still have upstairs, mugging up all this Russian, this Cyrillic alphabet, which was very difficult, because my 4 A levels were in European languages, and this was Cyrillic, which was a big step change from what I was used to.
Yeah, no common root.
And some of the others had done O-level Russian, and I didn't know a word of Russian. So I really worked like the clappers, and in the end I came 4th in the whole of the Royal Air Force, and swam easily into Cambridge. The 20 of us were selected from the whole of the Royal Air Force for the course at Cambridge, under this wonderful, wonderful woman, Professor Elizabeth Hill, who was an absolute dynamo. And the government loved her because she was doing exactly what they wanted, producing credible, very fluent Russian-speaking spies. And all sorts of household names did the same course. And so from there, mind you, I didn't have the makings of a spy, I'm afraid. So in a way you could argue with hindsight that their money on me was completely wasted, but I hugely benefited.
Yeah.
And when I went to Russia, my Russian was so good that they assumed I had a Russian parentage. And when I denied it and said, no, my mum's American and my father's English, they didn't believe me. They said, no, we don't believe you. You must have Russian parentage. Your Russian is so good. So full credit to Professor Hill for bringing us up to that standard in 15 months. It was a miracle of organised grafting. We did nothing but work, study. And of course, after that, being an undergraduate was a cakewalk compared to what we'd been through during national service.
So was that after your sort of trip to Europe?
So that was yes, my 2 gap years. So
gap years, yeah.
I hitchhiked across to Innsbruck University for my first gap year, aged 18. Then I went across to Perugia, across the Brenner Pass to North Italy, and did a second gap year at the University for Foreigners in Perugia in Italy. And
was that a hitchhike, or did you have
a
bicycle or a motorbike?
No, I took the train.
You took the train.
From across to Perugia, Sadly, my parents died in that year, in 1953, which was rather sad, very sad. And having done that, then I went to Cambridge, and following Cambridge, I got a consultancy at the Foreign Office, junior consultancy at the Foreign Office, and then Canada, and then from Toronto, rather than come home, I organised an American lecture tour. Not a very serious one, fairly sort of simple topics. One was about roof climbing in Cambridge. I remember we had four topics, and I remember one lovely old lady. She must have been all of 90. She sort of hobbled up to me at the end of my talk on whatever it was, and she said, "Mr. Eddison, may I shake your hand and say that this live long and like it club, of which I've been a member for 20 years, yours was the first lecture talk where I haven't gone to sleep." I've always remembered that.
Well done, Robert. Then you were about 25, was it, or something?
I'll tell you exactly how I was, 1960, 20, national service, about mid-20s.
Mid-20s, right. And you got back from America?
I got back from America, and then that's right, and then attempted to make a career in Fleet Street, and completely failed.
Then you got onto your North London.
I didn't totally fail. I mean, I placed some articles. I mean, there was a strike, I remember, and I left here, this house, with 2 or 3 features written. They weren't commissioned because nobody knew me. I just take them in on spec, and in those days you didn't have to. There was no security. You just walked in. I said, "Where's the features desk? What's the name of your features editor?" Go straight to him. "Oh, hello, Mr. whatever his name was. Would you like to read this and hopefully use it?" "Oh, well, that's very nice of you. What's your name?" "Oh, yeah, very nice of you, very nice of you. I'll let you know tomorrow." And I said, No. I said, if you're not taking it, I want to pass it on to the next newspaper. And I got them to read it there and there. And sure, sometimes they wouldn't take it, other times they did. But on one occasion, one editor looked at the article and said, "It's not for us, Robert." And I said, I was very cheeky, in your 20s you're cheeky as hell. I said, why aren't you taking it? It just isn't quite right for us, Robert. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, for instance, I'll give you an example. He said, you've got a quote here. It comes 2/3 of the way down the first page. It needs to come much higher up. I said, okay, well, I'll put it higher up. He said, well, yes, but it's not just that, Robert. I think, if you don't mind my saying so, you do need to train to be a journalist. Because you can write a good university essays. No, it doesn't mean that you can be a journalist. And I took that to heart. And to cut to the chase, that resulted years later, once I acted on his advice, in my applying for that job in North London.
Right.
And those 3 years training under Eric Gordon were invaluable. And in their own way, they did for me in journalism what Cambridge had done, to tighten me up intellectually. Because when I applied for a place at Cambridge, I was very loose analytically and sort of muddled through and got nowhere. And I applied to 4 colleges. In those days, it's rather like in what was then Fleet Street. You just walk in, and you arrange it the day before to be interviewed. And the first interview I had was with the master himself, which would never happen today. You're interviewed by admissions tutors who act on behalf of the master. So the master, we had a nice chat, and he said, Robert, I'm sorry, we can't offer you a place at Clare. And I said, why? And he said, because you're very woolly-minded. You don't think logically. You lack analytical drive. And in our undergraduates, we do expect a higher level of analytic power and ability to think logically and sequentially. So I took that on the chin. But I had 3 other colleges to be interviewed at. I went to Selwyn and they offered me a place, but I refused it because it was too cold. There was no central heating.
That's a good reason.
And well, at that age, your reasons are they're just laughably flaky. And then I was accepted by another college, and I refused that. And then I ended up at Trinity, not knowing it was the richest and by far the most prestigious college in the whole of Cambridge. You know nothing when you're in your 20s. You know nothing. But I love eating out. I always have. And there was a wonderful restaurant opposite Great Gate at Trinity. And I thought, oh, if it's raining, I'm not going to eat the college food. If it's raining, I can just cross the road and have a decent meal. So I thought I accepted Trinity. That was my reason for going to Trinity, where Prince Charles went.
So was it Trinity that sharpened you up and got you thinking properly? So you can train to sharpen your brain.
Oh my God, you can. Of course you can. Yeah. Provided you have it in you to be trained, which virtually everybody has.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it transformed me. I mean, I got to Cambridge despite my schooling. I mean, at school, now that's another story. I was bottom of every class, I think, except English.
So where did you start your schooling days? Was that in London? Or?
I'm not talking prep school. I'm obviously I got my common entrance to a public school, which will remain unnamed.
Okay.
And I was bottom of every class because I rebelled. I mean, they tried to teach you by rote, and I saw no point in knowing the middle name of Henry VIII's third wife. I mean, who cares? You know, who cares what her name? Where's he going? Well, why are you telling me this? Well, why do I need to know? So I kind of rather rebelled because I was very cheeky in those days, and the teachers rather disowned me, and being rather bright and a lifelong member of Mensa, untrained teachers, and they were largely untrained after the war, you know, they couldn't distinguish between a bright boy who was bored and rebellious, which was me, and less able boys who
were just rebellious,
who just couldn't.
Who didn't climb roofs?
No, that's not my point. And the less rebellious boys who couldn't meet the teacher standards, academic standards.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't meet them. I was bottom of every class. But equally, rather less able boys couldn't meet them because they were unable to meet them. That's the point. And these untrained teachers couldn't distinguish between the two. So I really suffered from my schooling. And I remember, I've still got it, the headmaster's report at the end of my first year. So this is the worst report on any new boy I have ever read as master of this college.
But there was something in you, obviously, Robert, that has come out over the years.
Well, Cambridge brought it out.
Cambridge brought it out.
Cambridge brought it out. So, yeah.
And we've got the army to thank for that.
The army taught me. Yes, you're right. I mean, the Royal Force, the RAF taught me to concentrate and to realise how able I was, at least in languages. And yes, it sort of unbruised my self-esteem to an extent. But even in my first year at Cambridge, I was still had terribly low self-esteem. It took a while to sort of make up for lost ground, really.
Yeah, that's so important for people, isn't it? I was reading in the paper today about how young people are, their self-esteem is going down, and there was this professor who was thinking it's because they spend so much time on social media.
Well, yes, there is this school of thought which says that, but again, it's difficult to attribute cause, isn't it? There could be other reasons as well.
Yeah. So we've gone quite far back, but as you were telling me your age as you went along, you must have been born a few years before the end of the war?
I was born in 1933, 6 years before the Second World War broke out, yes.
So where were you living at that time, Robert?
In Tunbridge Wells.
You were in Tunbridge Wells?
Where I was born.
Where you were born, and you were still there in 1939?
Yes, we were. My father built a house outside, just above Tunbridge Wells, and we were there. Yes, my sister was born in the new house, yes. I was born just down the road from there.
So do you have any remembrances of that? You obviously, maybe you looked up and saw the Battle of Britain happening above your head?
Oh, my sister and I, we had a wonderful war. We couldn't wait for the sirens to go, and there we were in bed at night, and then the siren would go at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then we would the routine, we'd go out to the front porch, put on our Wellingtons, and then we would go across the dewy grass, across the bank, into what was then Lord Montgomery's unofficial secret headquarters, just across from our house. And then there was a huge big hole in the ground, which was a big dugout, and we'd all go there and wait for the German aircraft to go over, to pass over, and for the all clear to ring out. And then when we heard the all clear, following the bombing on London, because they passed over our heads to get to London, you see. Yeah. So they never bombed us, which was wonderful. Yeah. So as children, of course, it was incredibly exciting. And across Frant Road, outside our house, was an army camp, Nissen huts all over. And you saw the squads of soldiers marching up and down St Mark's Road every day. And then we had motorcyclists passing down Frant Road at huge speed, which to a young boy is just so exciting. Yeah. With couriers and messengers, and then bringing messages to Montgomery's secret headquarters just by our house. We felt in the centre of all the action without suffering anything, because nobody wanted to bomb us.
No. Did you go out and collect pieces from crashed aircraft?
Well, yes, we had my father on his mantelpiece in the study had a brass cylinder that high, polished brass, which the cleaner always polished, and we discovered that in the garden, oddly enough. How it got there, I don't know, because there was no kudos for Hitler to bomb Tunbridge Wells, No. No big deal. No, he was coming over our heads to bomb London. Yeah. And we just happened to be in the flight path. So
he wanted to land down the road, so he didn't want a lot of...
Well, quite. And then there was a field across the other side of Frant Road where you had a lot of small aircraft coming and going, and it was incredibly exciting, the whole thing. We had a wonderful war.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, Robert, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? We've gone backwards, really, from today back to before the war.
We have.
Is that how interviews normally go, do you think?
I have no idea.
Maybe we're breaking new ground here. But it's been really brilliant.
Well, I think there's nothing more boring than a writer who doesn't know how to write, who says, I was born in X town in X year. Who the excuse the word, cares? Because we don't know who he's talking about until we've been introduced to him. And then, I mean, we may or may not be interested, but if we are interested, then we are interested in his earlier life.
Well, I hope we've covered some things that might well be interesting to people, and it was really brilliant of you, Robert, to accede to my request of having this little chat. And I've loved it. I've learnt a lot about you, and I think we've actually dug out quite a bit of information that you might not have thought of telling me without in the first place. But it's been really lovely.
Good.
And I'm sure we've got it all recorded down here, so we'll edit out a few ums and ahs, hopefully, but not much else. And you can have a look at it and see whether you want to use it for any other purpose.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's awfully nice of you to sort of want to give the time to it. I enjoyed it.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Robert. And we'll have another little chat maybe when the 30th book comes out.
Oh, well, yes, that'll be the day.
Yeah.
That'll be the day. Yeah.
Maybe before that.
I think before that.
Because there'll be a big story, won't there, when you go on your world tour promoting it?
Well, I'd like to go to New York for the launch of the American edition, because it's selling well over there now. And me being half American and having done a lecture tour in the States, it would be very nice to go back.
Yeah, and they can understand it, being we talk a similar language.
Well, indeed. Actually, what was Oscar Wilde's wonderful comment? The British and Americans have everything in common except language.
Yes. I'll tell you another quick little. We've signed off, haven't we? But I'll tell you this. My name actually comes from America.
Really?
You've mentioned that we were starving at the end of the war, however.
Yes.
We actually were sent food parcels from
Yes,
America.
yes.
Did you know that?
Yes.
And my mother, I don't know whether she had a food parcel or whether somebody gave her something from her food parcel, but whatever it was had a free gift with it, and that was a book of names.
Yeah.
And my name was in there. Durwin was in that book.
Right.
And I know that there may be not another one in this country, but I know there are about 600 or 700 in America.
Right.
Isn't that incredible?
That is.
So I'm really, really delighted about that. So,
Yeah.
so I've got a little American connection too.
You're lovely. It's lovely. Durwin. Yes.
Yeah.
No, not Banks, but Durwin, the first name.
Durwin.
Yes. How interesting. Very good.
Good. Well, Robert,
Well, I hope that was all right.
I'm going to shake hands with you and say thank you so much.
Was that all right?
It was lovely.
Oh, good.